Good morning, or actually afternoon. So I'll give you an afternoon update on the third stimulus check, or stimulus check 3, so however you want to talk about it. So this third round of stimulus that we're looking at here, this is an interesting article. There was a follow-up to what happened, what I talked about yesterday, how there was talk about targeting, that's the term, they quote unquote targeting people who they felt were more in need, people who were lower income, poor families, people without a job right now, for the third round of stimulus checks. So that was what was going on with the update as a potential option among Democrats. And this article from Kiplinger says, third stimulus check update, Democrats mostly reject targeting of $1,400 stimulus checks. So depending on what your income is, this can be considered very good news. So it talks about how the House Democrats' latest stimulus check plan applies to the same phase-out thresholds used for previous stimulus payment plans, but families making over $200,000 a year wouldn't get a check. So remember, because there was talk about reducing it to those making, I think capping it at $50,000, where before it was $75,000. So we'll jump into this here. And so it says, despite all the talk about targeting a third round of $1,400 stimulus checks, it says House Democrats release a new bill Monday evening that adopts the same phase-out thresholds used for the first and second round payments. So that means more people are going to be getting a check on this third one than they had. Then there was some talk about. So there's talk about having less people get it, but doesn't look like that's going to be the case right now. Bill was drafted by the House Ways and Means Committee, will become part of the larger House budget reconciliation bill that is being cobbled together to enact President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus plan. So it says, if it's passed, most Americans who received an earlier stimulus payment will also receive a third stimulus check. So if you got a check the first 2 times, you're probably going to get one this third time around as well, is what it looks like. So it says stimulus checks would not be reduced for single Americans earning up to $75,000, head of household filers making up to $112,500, and married couples with a combined income of $150,000. So as with previous stimulus checks, they would get a full payment, in this case $1,400 per person, $2,800 per couple, plus an additional $1,400 for each dependent. So that's pretty big. So if you're, husband and wife with 2, 3, 4 kids or more, you're going to be getting, basically $1,400 per person is what you're looking at getting. So if you're taking care of, like your elderly parents or something like that as dependents, then you're going to be getting $1,400 per dependent. Now here it gets into some of the numbers about your adjusted gross income. So if you make over $75,000 as a single person, then it says your stimulus payment would be gradually phased out until it reached zero. For those making $100,000 or more, so this is talking about single. So you're a single person making $100,000 or more, it doesn't look like you're going to be getting anything. So if you had a household filer, phase-out range is going to be a bit higher, from $112,500 to $150,000 is what you're looking at. And then for the married couples filing a joint return, the phase-out range would be $150,000 to $200,000. So that's what we're looking at as far as the ranges, the caps they're putting on all this kind of stuff. And this is always kind of a bit of a debate because, for some people, if you're living in like Norman, Oklahoma or something like that, then, $150,000 goes a really long way. If you're, living in Los Angeles or New York City or something like that, $150,000 does not go nearly as far. Now, this is part of the debate here where it talks about, is this a win or compromise for the progressives in the Democratic Party? Because the progressives usually want to spend more money. They wanted to spend more. They didn't want to bring the income threshold down to target, people who some other Democrats who are more moderate felt like it was going to be more beneficial if they only gave it to people with lower income. So this is part of what they're talking about, a little bit of this divide within the party, saying how the decision to maintain the previous thresholds is a victory for progressive wing of the Democratic Party, but talks about moderate Democrats like Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia. He wanted any additional stimulus to target those most in need. So he said that he supports helping people in need, people that really can't make it, people that don't have a job. So that's just how he felt. He said, we need to start targeting those people who really are at the bottom of, this economic situation right now. So that was his plan. That was what he felt. would be a good way to go. Obviously, many other Democrats did not feel the same way. And as far as the phase-out thresholds, there had been discussion in the past. I remember hearing this last year, that there were thoughts to to reduce the threshold to as low as $40,000 for singles and $80,000 for couples, which, again, depending on where you're living, that threshold, $40,000 of living in San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Miami, Chicago, something like that as a single person versus $40,000 a year up in Pocatello, Idaho. I mean, those are very different economic situations, even though you're making the same amount of money. So that was a big concern for a lot of people. Is the threshold, is the payout amounts, is, how are you going to try to do that more fairly when you're deciding who's going to get what money and that kind of thing. So this part just again talks about progressives fighting back about lowering the threshold. They argue that middle-class Americans who have received their payments reduced or eliminated through lower thresholds need help too. So this is where Bernie Sanders chimed in and was tweeting. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez got in on it too as well. So they basically, their whole push from people who are fall into the category of progressive Democrats, they wanted more people to receive stimulus checks. From more moderate Democrats, were not quite so keen on the idea. Now, it says here, this is kind of important to note too, it says, nevertheless, despite the win on the phase-out thresholds, it says there is some compromise in the House bill. So in December, the House passed the Cash Act, which also would have authorized another round of $1,400 stimulus checks, plus an additional $1,400 per dependent. This bill was blocked by Republicans in the Senate. Primary reason cited by Republicans for killing that bill was that it would have sent thousands of dollars to people who didn't need the money. So this is where Senator Mitch McConnell chimes in, and he said, note at the time that a family of 5 where the parents earned $250,000 and have not seen any income loss during the pandemic would still receive a $5,000 stimulus check under the Cash Act. So under this new bill, that's not going to happen. So under the new House bill, no one, regardless of how many dependents they have, will get any third round of stimulus money if their adjusted gross income is above the $100,000 mark for singles, $150,000 for head of households, or $200,000 for joint filers. That's going to be the cutoff. And, the question, of course, is this going to be enough to satisfy, moderates in the Democratic Party? So that's what they're looking at right now. But that is what we're looking at as far as an update for this afternoon on February 9th, 2021 for your third round of stimulus checks.